Hello, everybody. Welcome to the workshop today. My name is Brian Rawlson. I'm a senior product engineer on the ArcGIS Hub team. Today I'll be joined by Chase Gruber, who is a senior developer on the ArcGIS Hub team. We're here to talk to you a little bit today about effective community engagement. We're going to use ArcGIS Hub in order to do that. Just keep in mind that some of this is available to you if you're running on enterprise sites, and a lot of this is available to you if you just have a creator licensed user in ArcGIS in any capacity. You could use Hub to do this, but it's not necessarily required. But today, because we're from the Hub team, we're going to centralize it in Hub and really show you how Hub can be a really beneficial experience to any type of engagement style experience. Today, we're going to spend a rather brief amount of time focused on actually what is Hub as an introduction. There are 3 additional webinars that you feel free to explore that talk a lot about site design, page design, what is Hub, what does that mean on ArcGIS Online, how is that different than enterprise sites. I'll highlight those at the end of that section. But today we're just kind of going to breeze through, talk a little bit about patterns of customer usage, a few examples, and then get really into the problem of today, which is understanding effective engagement. We're going to be leveraging known patterns, generally through marketing and other e-commerce implementations, reconsidering that for what it means for an enterprise organization or any type of community that you might be targeting. Finally, we're going to walk through the actual workshop itself. I'm going to take a little bit of time to define the problem statement, what we did to ideate the solution, what assets we needed to gather up front in order to kind of see that through, where Hub fit the bill out of the box, where it didn't. And then I'm going to hand the show over to Chase, and he's really going to take it home for us, walk step by step through some of the things that he did on the implementation side of things to see the problem's workflow actually successful from beginning to end. So let's talk briefly about Hub. The product itself is all about giving authority to your digital creativity. And as a product, we define that by this statement. It's a cloud-based engagement platform that lets organizations work more effectively with their communities. And that is a really great and well-defined statement, but it often scares a lot of people because of the words engagement and community. Engagement is only meant to meet your needs, okay? So many customers use Hub as a centralized location to organize and showcase their own work, maybe just to their team members or to their actual broader public, to the world. Engagement is whoever you're trying to target, and that is your community. It could be your internal team, your boss, your entire agency, your customer, your client, or the general public as a whole. It can be often an overloaded term. So if you need help on it, every time we talk about community engagement, just think about reaching your target audience in this case. So I want to walk through an example of, just in a nutshell, what's one implementation of ArcGIS Hub. Here on the screen, you see the city of Raleigh, North Carolina on the left. That is their public city website. And on the right-hand side is their actual ArcGIS online portal. It's the most internal side of the house on the right and the most external side of the house on the left in a digital fashion. They used Hub to kind of bridge the gap from that most external to that most internal. In that fashion, they leveraged 3 of the 4 patterns we're about to walk through. They spun up a Hub site to educate, to collect, and to share information. We're going to define each one of those terms, but you can see that actually the branding was consistent across from their most external experience, at the same time being powered by the authority of their internal ArcGIS Online home application. This is just a single implementation of Hub, but you can see how a city actually used it to blend into their entire digital infrastructure, and something you are more than able to do for your customers, for your organization, and for your general audience. As we touched on, Raleigh used 3 out of the 4 common patterns that we see. We generated these 4 by looking at the roughly 4,500 public sites and then working back and trying to tease out what were the commonalities between all of them. This is where we ended up. Generally, sites fall into 4 categories of sharing, educating, collecting, and collaborating. These patterns are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And all that means is to say that a site may be all about sharing open data content, but then they will use a pattern of collection, maybe through a survey, in order to get an idea of the quality of the content that they are sharing or to field requests for new content to be shared. This is all to say that as we walk through these examples, you may see yourself in one or many of these patterns. We're going to highlight some good stewards of a pattern and then drive right into our workshop, mostly centered around the collecting pattern. All right, so let's jump right into it. First pattern that we talked about was sharing, and typically this has roots in our history of the product itself. We started off as open data many years ago when organizations were curating, collecting, and organizing their content and sharing that with the general public in some sort of capacity. Here we have the Maryland GIS data catalog on the screen, and you can see them targeting two different types of sharing type users. Typically, you see these broken down into those that are searchers and those that are explorers. And they're able to leverage both experiences by prominently displaying a search bar directly at the top of the page, really highlighting those people that know what they're looking for, i.e. the searchers, and then leveraging the category card further down for those that are trying to determine what they're looking for but don't really have a good understanding quite yet. And those are our explorer type of users. So this easy type of minimalist construction is actually able to really leverage the product to highlight both use cases in the sharing pattern. Next up, we have educating, which is really targeting information delivery around specific topics or goals. You see three examples here on the screen. The one on the far left is the actual DC Urban Forestry Department. They're just trying to educate their target audience, i.e. the general public. They even go back into a little history talking about the L'Enfant Plan, who Boss Shepherd was, and the Macmillan Plan following that. In the center, we have the city of Coral Gables highlighting the Flagler neighborhood and a redevelopment plan that they're looking at targeting. And on the far right, we have the entire country of Ireland translating the UN Sustainable Development Goals to their country's specific origin. So trying to explain to the Irish citizens what does the Sustainable Development Goals mean to them. Educating is not necessarily something where you're trying to ask for some sort of response. It's really about that types of information delivery so that someone comes to your site and when they walk away, they knew more than when they arrived. Next up, we have the collecting pattern, and this is something we see a lot of fast-growing use case around using existing ArcGIS applications such as Story 123, Story Maps, or Collector. This is all trying to get some sort of insights from your audience, whether it be data or additional types of feedback. We can see here on the screen, it could be actually blended quite seamlessly with other types of patterns. Here we have Open Data DC, who's predominantly a sharing pattern, Open Data for the city of DC, highlighting an entire feedback section of their open data site, just trying to understand what data are we missing? Do you have any data that you might want to supply to us? And this is all leveraging an embed of Survey 123. Here we have a fabulous example from Lynn, Washington about call to action. And here at the top of the page, you can see becoming a park champion. They want you to do three things right off the bat. They want you to sign up, become a park champion, map your walk, and complete that survey. And then a little further down, they actually have an embedded web app builder to display where the parks that they want you to collect this information from are actually residing. A more serious example of this is the Missing Society of Canada. They don't bury the lead at all. They're really cognizant about how they want you to get that information to them through a collecting format. They want you to help us find and reunite children and their families by installing an application if you need to, viewing the active cases, leaving a tip via Survey 123, or registering to receive SMS alerts when some sort of Amber Alert is our version of it in the US, or whatever a missing child report comes out in whatever municipality that might be. Our final pattern is around collaboration, and this is usually with trusted audiences, but doesn't necessarily have to be. In this pattern, we see most of the future growth of the application and probably leverages a lot of our premium tools, whether it be community identity, supporting teams, followers, or events. And the idea here is to start some sort of two-way feedback loop that's in synchrony. So you actually find volunteers, you invite them to work on the site together, collecting data and then highlighting that data outward. So that was a quick review, and we're obviously not going to spend too much time going too detailed into any one of these patterns. The chances are, as we walk through them, you may have seen yourself in one or many of those patterns. Even a few of our examples that we walk through showcase how leveraging multiple patterns set up that site or initiative for its largest amount of success. Feel free to explore this in your own time. In a little bit, we're actually going to highlight a QR code and a short URL on the screen that will take you to the workshop site From there, we've actually highlighted a lot of these types of patterns via the public accessible sites that you can explore and kind of learn from as you think about setting up your first implementation of Hub or even your 50th version of Hub. That brings me to a little reminder I like to include in all these presentations. We walk through a bunch of patterns built off examples of about 4,500 public sites. And that's a lot of people creating a lot of things that's visible to the general public. But the fact of the matter is, in the first quarter of this year, over 2,000 sites were actually created. So if there's only 4.5 public sites available and 2,000 were created in a single quarter, the actual larger use case of Hub is for some sort of internal audience, whether that be your internal agency, just you and your boss, or your internal team to spin up and share your information, educate your coworkers, collect information from the field, or collaborate together on some sort of target. So just keep that in mind as you think about who your site is for. It doesn't always have to be public. It's whatever audience that you're trying to engage with. Understanding that audience is your community, and that engagement is what you're trying to extract from them or provide to them. Okay, so on the screen right here, you'll see a QR code. Feel free to pause. Whip out your smartphone, open the camera app, and just hold it over the screen. You'll see a notification banner pop down. Select that, and it'll take you right to the workshop site where a lot of these examples are showcased, as I just said. A last point I'll make is we're not going to talk really hardly at all about designing sites and pages or what that means in the organization itself. There are 3 different webinars all focused on that for Dev Summit 2020. They talk about it at different levels. The first one is really more around technical tips. The second one is more around design. The last one is targeted just enterprise customers only. So feel free to explore those on your own time and then come back into this presentation and leverage some of these collecting resources that we're about to walk through in this workshop. So now it's really time to talk about effective engagement. And we're going to take some best practices from the private sector we see and a lot of e-commerce and marketing channels, and that all centers around some sort of conversion funnel, and we're going to relabel that from conversion to engagement for the purposes of this workshop. Generally, this type of engagement is broken down into 5 broad categories, whether it be creating the actual opportunity to engage, maybe a Survey 123 application, identifying and distributing that opportunity to some sort of target audience. Your channels for that may be a listserv, sharing it to social media, or even a hub site itself. Third, we see a lot of time spent on actually analyzing those engagement responses, and we understand why it takes so much time. Then people may or may not, depending on the desire of the opportunity, want to then showcase those results back in some sort of manner. And finally, it's all about understanding how effective you were in the first place with this opportunity. Did you target the right audiences? What does your analysis tell you about next steps? Too often, though, we find that this flow is rather linear. There's no optimization when these opportunities are created and shared. And what I mean by that is I've progressed from 1 to 5, and with that same opportunity, can I then retarget and redistribute to new audiences based off of what I've learned and off the analysis of the responses I've gotten so far? At the end of the day, a lot of people fall into this 30-60 trap, and I can understand why on the 60, because it can be quite burdensome. But we find many people spend a lot of time actually creating this opportunity to engage when a lighter weight implementation would have served the purpose and allowed you to target more effectively going forward. Generally, this breaks out into leaving very little time and effort being actually allocated to that identification, distribution to target audiences, showcasing those results, and almost never understanding the engagement efficacy of your opportunity itself. The main takeaway here and why we're having this workshop is that most organizations looking for some sort of engagement have a very limited understanding around the efficacy of their effort. And why that's a problem is you could be spending a lot of cycles, a lot of money, a lot of time and effort on trying to do the same thing that just isn't working because you're missing something in the first place, and that was already told to you. So leveraging our tools as developers in the near term, we're going to walk through how we can overcome that leveraging Hub today. So the purposes of our conversation today, I'm going to oversimplify the solution massively. but an ideal allocation may look something more like this. And there's a lot of numbers on the screen, but the general takeaway here is it's less of creating the opportunities up front and using that optimization so that they are more targeted, better aligned with what you're trying to get after, more time actually identifying and distributing to target audiences. Hopefully along the lines, this means that there's less time required of analyzing those engagement responses, generally the same amount of time for showcasing those results if you're targeted with doing so, and then a lot more time understanding how effective you were in that engagement in the first place. And I just want to add, you must think about iterating over these steps in order to optimize your engagement efficacy going forward, whether it be with this first opportunity or any subsequent opportunities that you're thinking about leveraging in the future. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean by efficacy, how effective your engagement was in the first place. On the screen, you're going to see a very simplified funnel. And you may or may not be very aware with what funnels mean in the sense of attracting audiences, getting them to do something, and actually converting them as some sort of user. In our exercise today, we're all going to be thinking about how do we move people down the funnel from being an available audience to us and actually all the way down to being a converted member in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a new follower of our initiative or an e-commerce, a buyer of our product. What methods are we using to measure their progress down that funnel? And how are we deriving insights from that progress so that we can inform next steps and optimize their workflow through the funnel? In e-commerce, example of this may be as follows. So I have a public website up, I'm selling shoes. So there's some sort of demographic of interest. I might be sharing those to Instagram or Facebook, targeting that demographic. I'm therefore getting some click-through rate of site traffic. I'm measuring the number of clicks per session to try and determine how engaged this user is as they explore my product site. I'm then measuring if they're repeat viewers, if they've signed up to my email newsletter for new product enhancements and announcements, and then whether or not they went all the way down the funnel and actually purchased my product. All right, so let's get going on the workshop itself. So we're going to try and create, deploy, and monitor an engagement funnel leveraging Hub and a few outside third-party developer tools that are easily accessible to everyone. So to really frame this session, we wanted to establish some sort of scenario that would kind of guide our workshop. And this is it on the screen. But in a nutshell, it's essentially our communications department wants to track signups and follows for a particular Hub initiative. And Hub initiative is a premium side of a Hub site that actually allows you to have multiple teams and a followers group. And we're going to focus on that followers group. These are people that have essentially said, hey, I'm interested in what you're trying to do. Here's my username and then my email, and please get in contact with me. No scenario would be complete without at least having some constraints. So we're going to constrain ourselves to at least leveraging only ArcGIS assets. But obviously, as I said before, any sort of external third-party implementation is welcome as long as it's trying to elicit maximum success for our communications department. So the first thing we're going to do is unpack this scenario into 4 questions. What is our targeted user workflow? What do we get out of the box with Hub and ArcGIS? What assets do we need to create to establish the workflow? And at last but not least, the most important side of it for us as developers, what do we actually need to code? So Chase and I kind of turned to a whiteboard and we mocked out what a targeted user flow may look like. And it generally broke down into 7 steps. So the user clicks into the Hub page from some sort of channel distribution. We're going to say our communications department is going to handle that side of the funnel for us. That Hub page has a Survey123 app embedded on it, essentially saying, hey, this is what we're all about. We'd love to learn more about you. What's your name? What's your email? And what are you most interested in? The user may or may not submit a response to that survey. Based off of their answers, they'll get a follow-up thank you email. And inside that email will contain a link to another Hub page that's closely correlated to the interest that they actually expressed to us in that survey. Upon opening that interest, we're going to essentially log a page view from the email, and then further track who actually created accounts, and then from those accounts created, who ended up following the Hub initiative. So as usual, we've got to ask ourselves, what do we get out of the box? So again, I'll restate it. The communications department, we're kind of going to shirk this responsibility and say, hey, you guys handle the targeting and distribution, whether that be through a listserv, social media, what have you. We need to understand from that distribution, what are we actually capturing? We do provide some low-level analytics, and that's all based off of site traffic, but not necessarily page traffic. And our survey and our conversion pages, those interest pages, are going to be on separate pages off of the main site. So we want to better understand what traffic is on those specific pages. We do get submissions, obviously, by the number of responses recorded for the survey. That is logged in the feature service of the Survey 123 application. We'll have very little idea about who the repeat viewers are. And when I mean by repeat viewer, this is someone that actually completed the survey, got an email sent to them, and they came back to one of our conversion pages. We don't get signups tied to a particular site or initiative. We do get it for the entire Hub community itself. And we do get a number of followers based off of the actual membership of the followers group behind the scenes. So that kind of tells us a little bit about what assets we need to create to right off the bat. We're going to set up a new initiative site. We do supply just generic Google Analytics, but we're going to need to leverage our own Google Analytics key in order to tackle that page view traffic and some of the other insights that we're looking to target. These are free to anyone with a Gmail account, and you can just simply copy and paste that into your site's settings and underneath the domain in the site settings on the layout editor. From there, we're going to create a Survey 123 application that just asks 3 generic questions. What's your first and last name? What's your email address? What are you most interested in? Chase will walk through the webhook that he actually established and hooked into that survey on the other side. We're going to need to have a hub page actually embedding that survey, and then 3 interest pages that are going to be targeted on that conversion of the expressed interest of the Survey 123 application. And finally, some email templates that are sent out depending on who that user was, whether or not they responded, and what the responses actually were. So I'm going to walk through each one of these assets individually, but as developers and product engineers, we even find it extremely helpful to just visualize the actual workflow and mapping out these missing pieces and what the conversion funnel may or may not look like. So on the screen you see here another QR code. Again, pause the screen, scan that. What that's going to do, it's going to actually open you up into this Lucid chart that we went ahead and created for, it was actually for us, but you can more than happy, it's publicly available to you. You might just have to create a free Lucid chart account in order to view it. So someone comes in, they say, hey, there's a hub page with a survey on it. We're going to log a page view into Google Analytics for that. That's going to contain the embedded Survey 123 form, 3 questions, full name, email address, topic of interest. They can either submit the survey or not. Let's proceed on the happy path. We're going to log the responses in the feature service from there. Then leveraging the Survey 123 webhook that Chase will walk through, we're going to determine whether a user is auth or not, and then from there, what email template we should be sending them based off the interest selection from the survey that was embedded. Our third-party mail client is going to send them an email that uses that email address, full name, interest, and it's going to have an open tracker on it. Chase will walk through the implementation there, but that's essentially going to allow us to derive whether or not the email was opened or not, and then from there, what the click-through of that email was. So how effective was this email in actually generating traffic to these interest conversion pages? And so the user would land on said interest of the survey. We'll get a page view event again. They may or may not select follow. If they do, they'll be prompted to create an account if they don't already have one. And we'll log 2 additional telemetry events from there. One for sign in or sign up, depending on what their user profile status is. And then finally, whether or not they join the following group if they were already a follower or not. And this all returns to the previous workflow of them being a follower and coming towards an end. The actual funnel looks something like this. So page views, submissions, was the email delivered, the open rates of the email, the click-through rate of that email, and then follows signs of sign up. Now kind of give us a rough understanding what our campaign efficacy actually turned out to be. So now that we have a good understanding of the workflow, we've mapped it out, we know what assets we're going to create, we went ahead and prior to this presentation, spun up all those assets. And here you'll see the workshop site, which again, you can get to by scanning the QR codes previously in this presentation. It even includes links over to the workshop repo, which includes all the code that Chase will walk you through here in a second, and the results on the other side. Clicking About Hub will take you to our product page if you're interested in learning more. And we've even collected a little bit of more information about other Hub sites, a general survey that you are free to take and free not to take, and how that populates through, and some best practice embedded videos there for your enjoyment. So we have the Hub site. but we actually were running mostly off of pages. So I'm going to go ahead and click the edit pencil here, and I'm going to come into the site editor, and I'm going to click pages, and I created all these pages by going new page. And as you may or may not be aware, if you scanned any of the QR codes, the pages are just interest-based. So either you're interested in me, you're interested in Chase, or you're interested in Keanu Reeves. And we have the survey page here itself, which when selected and open is literally just that survey embedded onto the page by itself using the survey card in embed format. Now these are the three questions: what's your full name, what's your email address, who's your favorite person, Chase, myself, or Keanu. I have a feeling Keanu will be winning this round because who doesn't love Keanu Reeves? And corresponding to each one of those, we went ahead and created an additional conversion page. Pretty simple, just for the purposes of illustrating it. Here's a page for myself, the page for Chase, and finally, the page for Keanu. So people will come to one of these conversion pages based off the email that they receive following submission of the survey. They will then log a telemetry event essentially on the page view so we can determine which the highest interest conversion was. And then this button right here will actually say follow to an anonymous user. They can select that, create an account if they need to, or actually just follow this initiative. So we can work our way all the way down the funnel. Those surveys were created actually within Hub. There's no need to go outside to Server 123 to do it. You can go to your sites menu here, click on feedback, and you'll see both of those surveys displayed here. This is the one that actually will take you to the workshop site based off the QR code earlier in the presentation. And this is the one powering our workshop today with a webhook that Chase configured on the other side. So that's a quick tour of all the assets that we needed right off the bat. There was a results asset. That's a page that displays what the actual efficacy of our engagement was. Chase will be walking through that in detail at the tail end of his presentation of all the code that he wrote and how he stood everything up. I will say, as part of, since I'm here, I'm just going to go to settings, domain, and this is where you will copy and paste your Google Analytics key in order to derive those page views so you can better understand what traffic looks like on the survey page and also on those conversion pages. Before Chase takes over from here, I just want to highlight the survey that you guys are seeing as you're scanning these QR codes. A little note, all questions are totally optional except for this one, just whether or not you want to answer follow-on questions or not. Any of the information you give us is private to us for the workshop purposes in order to tailoring how we do our presentations, what's most relevant to you going forward. It'll all be anonymous, of course, but if you have time, feel free to fill some stuff out. It'll just ask you essentially, what sector do you work in? What type of industry are you in that sector? What's your level? And then you can go in from there and telling us why you came here, any other reasons for attending. And if you want to expand this first half, this will be really helpful for me to about what is most relevant to you in the first half of the presentation of these workshops. We're really trying to isolate what's the most relevant for everyone's time, and this type of stuff is really powerful for us to take forward as we iterate and evolve these presentations to be the most entertaining, most informative, and most impactful for your own work. So I really appreciate it. From here, I'll give the mic and the screen over to Chase to take us through the rest of the presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. That was a great overview of Hub, engagement, best practices as we see them, and I think it was very fundamental for framing the scenario we're about to work through. In this section of the presentation, we'll talk more about technical details on how we prototype this engagement funnel using Hub and some outside technologies. We'll provide a high-level overview of the technologies that we used, but also be sure to point out areas where you could further customize or augment this process to better suit your needs, highlighting areas where we made decisions just for the sake of a demo that might not always be suitable in all cases. But before we begin going down that path, I wanted to let you know that you can follow along with the tutorial on GitHub. Simply navigate to this link here, and in the header, click the link for Workshop Repo, and that will take you to a GitHub repository with a very detailed README and step-by-step instructions for deploying this solution on your own. Quick recap of our challenge. We're tasked with driving signups and follows of our initiative, which is a great cause. We feel very strongly about this hypothetical initiative that we're promoting. We have our engagement funnel, which Brian explained in detail. and this targeted user flow down the funnel. So ideally, a visitor on our hub site will find the page with the embedded survey, take the survey, and based on their response to the survey, we can send them a crafted email that gauges their interests as they've expressed. We hope that they open that email, click on the link inside, and that drives them to further engage with this initiative by signing up or signing in, authenticating somehow, and ultimately following the initiative. One thing worth noting here is that our funnel is far from perfect. It has leaks, it has holes. Not every visitor that enters our funnel will make it to the end. People get distracted. If you've ever browsed the internet before, I'm sure you can attest to that. So what we're hoping to capture with these engagement analytics that we're going to be adding in the next steps is how many users made it from point A to point B, point A being landing on our site, to point B following our site, and not merely by chance, but as a result of the subtle prods that we'll give them with our follow-up engagement steps. Next, we need to think about measures, or how are we going to quantify the effectiveness of our engagement funnel? Fortunately, each step in our targeted user flow can be described as a measurable dimension in some sense. At the very top, we have page traffic for our initiative. This is the total number of hits that our initiative collects, the total number of passersby on the internet that find our initiative. The next thing that we would want to quantify is the number of surveys submitted. It's pretty straightforward. We want to know how many people are engaged with the survey that we've embedded on our page. As we plan to follow up with the survey respondents over email, we need to know the total number of emails that we send so that we can calculate open rate. Following on to number 4 here, we will also need to know the number of emails opened. And as those emails will contain links back to our hub site to these specific interest pages that are tailored to the survey responses, we want to have a sense of the page traffic generated by those links. So we want to capture how many times those links are referring users back to our site. And finally, we want to know how many initiative follow actions occur as a result of those links embedded in the email. So we want to know that people are taking the survey, reading the follow-up email that we send, engaging with that follow-up email by clicking the link, and ultimately following our initiative as a result. And this is a great strategy, but what can we actually measure out of the box? We have page traffic for an initiative, which we get from configuring Google Analytics, as Brian alluded to earlier, for our site. We also have some sense of the number of surveys that are submitted. This is true. We can count the number of records we have in our Survey 123 results, but this data store is separate from Google Analytics, and it would be really nice to have all of our information in one place so that we can consolidate a report and be able to display that data from a single source. You see that the next 3 steps are completely missing. We have no means to send an email, so emails obviously can't be opened, or there's no traffic being generated from emails. Finally, we do have some sense of initiative follow actions that occur. That comes from ArcGIS Hub's telemetry. So we would have that event logged in Google Analytics. But again, missing the email piece, we wouldn't be able to obviously know the number of initiative follows that result from these email links being clicked. So how do we complete this picture? How do we get rid of all of these red circles and have the green check marks down the entire list? Fortunately, Survey 123 has a configurable webhook, which we'll use as the entry point for filling in these missing pieces. Survey123's webhook will send a post request to a provided URL with a payload that could include information about the record submitted, the user submitting the record if they're authenticated, information about the survey's portal or the survey item and server response, which we won't be using in this tutorial. As of now, I'd say we're in pretty good shape. We can tell Survey123 to fire a post request at a REST endpoint that we'll provide and include in its payload all the information we need to tailor emails to specific users and continue to prod people down our engagement funnel and collect the analytics we need along the way. Next, we need to configure the server side of this demonstration. This would be the endpoint that we would provide our webhook, which will receive the post requests, parse their results, and do all the emails and log all the analytics. So for this, we chose to use Cloud Functions. Cloud Functions felt appropriate here because we're most concerned about writing and deploying server-side code and less concerned about scaffolding any server infrastructure and maintaining it. The tutorial that we follow here uses the serverless framework, which is great for orchestrating platform agnostic cloud applications. Our application is deployed to AWS as a CloudFormation project. It includes API endpoint gateway, the URL that will provide Survey123, as well as the Cloud Function as a Lambda. Just as easily, however, this application code could be deployed to other providers such as Azure or Google Cloud just by changing a few lines of configuration. The GitHub README goes into much greater depth about deploying serverless, but what's important to note at this point is that we have our responses on a server. We can execute code around those responses however we want. So in this example, we're going to log the additional analytics from the server using the Cloud Function firing as a proxy of surveys being submitted. The Cloud Function will be responsible for sending emails using a third-party email client. This example uses Mailgun, but you could integrate it to use your own CRM solution or mailing solution. And the emails that it sends will be embedded with tracking pixels, which will allow us to know whether or not the emails are open. And finally, the links contained within the emails will be decorated with parameters that will help Google Analytics decipher that traffic is being generated by the links in the emails. So to summarize, and before we jump into the code, the three main functions of our Cloud Function are to listen for webhook requests and parse the payloads so that we can template emails based on what we know about the respondents and what they've indicated in their responses. And tying it all together is adding these tracking parameters to the emails so that we can complete our engagement funnel all within the same analytics store as our hub site. So now let's jump into the code to see better how everything falls into place. The areas of the code base that I want to walk through in this demonstration highlight how we log analytics from our server, how our server receives and processes surveys, and how it ultimately sends emails with the embedded tracking. Other information about deploying or further configuring this code is included in the README, so I invite you to explore that further if you're interested. To get started, here is a file that I've abstracted out called analytics.js, and its responsibility is to provide our server instance, our Cloud Function, a mechanism to record and log events that we need to complete our engagement funnel. It uses a package from NPM called Universal Analytics, which when you provide it a Google Analytics tracking key, can write events to a Google Analytics store. So in this instance, our variable GA key will be the same tracking ID that we've already provided our initiative site in Hub. EC, or event category, is set to webhook events for all the events that get fired by this cloud function. And that's just so that we can more easily filter to the events that we're interested when we're in Google Analytics. It certainly doesn't have to be fixed for every event that gets fired. Every time our webhook is run, we'll create a unique analytic client. So using our Google Analytics key and the Universal Analytics library, we have an object that can log events. Here we have a helper method that will append this webhook events category to all of the events that get sent to our Google Analytics store. We also have a helper method for generating a tracking pixel. The way this tracking pixel works is when embedded in the body of an email, this image tag here with this source, and your email client attempts to download this source, which is pointed at our Google Analytics store using the key again, it will log an event in our analytics. The event action being email opened and the category being webhook events again. A final helper method that we're going to add to our analytics client generates campaign parameters that we will append to interest page URLs in our email templates. And this relates back to our Google Analytics store again, so that we can know which page views were referred to us by links embedded in emails. Next, I want to briefly focus on our API endpoint. So this is our listener for post requests made from our Survey123 webhook. We see here that the first thing it does is create our analytic client, which gets passed down through all the other code that gets executed in this cloud function. Primarily, the purpose of this file is to validate that the requests that we're interpreting are indeed from Survey123 and not from some other outside source. So assuming this validation is true, we'll go ahead and fire a survey processed event to Google Analytics using this as our count for the number of surveys submitted. And following along with that, we will invoke this function called engageUser, which will further parse the body of the request and template emails and eventually fire off those emails with the tracking embedded. Here in engageUser, we have lots of utilities being pulled in. One to parse a survey response. I'm not going to go too much into detail about this. Basically, what it does in this use case is find the email that the user supplied and which response they chose in the survey, who is most interesting to them of myself, Brian, or Keanu Reeves. This function also tells us about the user submitting the survey record. For instance, if the user were authenticated, we would know that we're dealing with an existing user and have some parameters so that we can engage with them differently via email. Moving down the list, we see that we generate our tracking pixel for the email. We get page is just a simple utility that maps the indicated favorite from the survey to the interest page link in Hub. Here we have our campaign params being generated from the analytics instance again, and this is merely just mashing those two together, appending the analytics params to our page links. Next, we need to determine what email template we should send. At this point, we know if we're dealing with an authenticated or an existing user or an anonymous user, but we want to take that even further and determine if our existing user has a relationship with our initiative already. We do that by executing this does user follow initiative function, which is a wrapper around the Hub.js library function that will determine whether the user is a member of our initiative's followers group. So if the user is already following the initiative, we want to send a slightly different email than if we have a user who is not already following our initiative will be a little more encouraging, hoping that that they will follow our initiative and help us reach our conversion goals. Really, at this point, given the user auth that we have, we could do a lot more than just check if they're following our initiative. For instance, we could add them to our initiative followers group automatically, or even add them to our core team if our form were more of an ingestion or a sign up form or something like that. But really, what you want to do with that is completely up to you. And now finally, we're ready to take all of this information that we've gathered and generate an email template. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Here we see all the different templates for the different user types that we've specified. An anonymous user, an existing ArcGIS Online user, and an existing follower of our initiative. So these templates can completely be customized however you want. Here you see that we're interpolating some of the information that the user provided to us from the survey, such as their name, who they indicated as their favorite. We're pasting in the follow-up link back to Hub with the campaign parameters embedded into it. And ultimately, we're creating a JSON object that can easily be ingested by our emailing client. So back here in Engage User, we have this gate around our function that sends emails just so that this this code can't be used to spam people. So we're going to ungate that for now for the sake of demonstration. But ultimately what happens in send email is we have our email third-party client configured, Mailgun again. You could use whatever solution you see fit. In doing so, this file would be different for you. But most importantly, after we send email with the parameters that we've specified, we're going to log an event that we have sent email to our Google Analytics store so that we can use that as the denominator of our open rate calculation. Of course, with the tracking pixel, the email opened event being the numerator. So now we're all ready to go. So I believe the next step would be for me to deploy this code, which we can do with a single command, serverless deploy. So we'll let that run. So once that's finished, we see all the service information for the application that we've deployed to the cloud using serverless. Most importantly here, we see endpoints. So this here is our REST endpoint that we will configure survey123 to hit on survey completion. So let's go ahead and copy that. Here we are in survey123. We've found the survey that's embedded into our hub page. We'll go ahead and click settings and then click webhooks. You see that I've already configured the webhook for this survey well in advance of this demo being recorded. However, let's take a look at how it's been configured. You see here that payload URL is the same as the output from our serverless deploy command. So you would paste your URL here. Our trigger events are configured to new records being submitted, and our payload is including everything. We really don't need server response or survey info, but there's no harm in including it. So now with our cloud function deployed and our webhook configured, our engagement funnel is complete. So what's left is to sit back and collect data. And then finally, the last step would be monitoring our results. So now we can step through our engagement funnel from start to finish. You can see that I'm not logged in. I'm on our Dev Summit Initiative site, and I'm going to click the link to take the survey. I'll go ahead and fill out the survey with my information. And I'll go ahead and select Brian as my favorite person because I'm a team player. So we're going to go ahead and submit this, and in the background, Survey123's webhook should have hit our cloud function, which in turn should send an email to the email that I provided, and that email should have the tracking pixel and the encoded link that will refer us back to Hub. So we're done with this page, and look, there's the email. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and open that, which should fire an event to Google Analytics. You won't see it. There's a invisible tracking pixel here, and here's our referral link. So being a good participant here, I'll go ahead and click that, which takes us back to Hub, and we'll select to follow the initiative here because we are very interested in Brian. So I'll log in, and it looks like I've followed the initiative. Perfect. Over time, we hope to see more traffic on our initiative site. And with this traffic, we can gain insights as to how users are engaging with our initiative. Are they finding the survey? If they find the survey, are they responding to the follow-up emails? If they're reading the follow-up emails, are they favoriting the initiative? Are they becoming more engaged? And depending on those results, we can adjust our engagement strategy accordingly. For results monitoring, the first place you would go is Google Analytics. However, I'm not going to spend too much time digging into Google Analytics here. I'm a far cry from an expert when it comes to Google Analytics, so I'll spare you that. Instead, I want to show a method that I used using a plugin for Google Sheets that integrates with Google Analytics to generate a data set that I can display on our initiative site. Here's the homepage for our initiative site's Google Analytics. So you can see it's not too busy right now. There is 0 active users, but I wanted to show the events that we're logging from the server in Analytics. So we can see here under event category, Webhook events, these are all the events being registered from our cloud function and emails. I can drill in further, see our emails being sent, surveys processed, emails opened, etc. We can look at page views here, page views for Brian's page, Keanu, my page, and these are all important as they are pieces to the funnel that we want to collate into a report. To do that, I've installed an add-on in Google Sheets called Google Analytics, which allows us to tap into our Google Analytics store for our initiative site and generate reports and run them whenever we want. So I've gone ahead and configured the reports that we need to visualize our funnel. The first report measures survey page views. So this is a measure, a total count of impressions made on the homepage of our initiative, where the title is Dev Summit 2020, or the survey page, where Dev Summit 2020-survey is the title. So this will tell us how many people are seeing our initiative and how many people are seeing our survey. It's the mouth of our funnel. The second report that we're going to configure is for webhook events. So this is a measure of the total events that happen that belong to the category webhook events. You'll remember that in our cloud function, we applied the event category webhook events to all of the events that take place. And this was the reason why, so that we could more easily filter down to these events in this report. The third event that we're interested in is the email click-through. Of the emails that get opened, how many times are those links being clicked? So to drill into this, we need to measure page views on pages that begin with Dev Summit 2020. So these could be any of the interest pages and whose referrer medium was email. In the campaign parameters that we append to the interest page links in the email, we encoded this medium parameter. So by filtering to these events, we know that these are page views, these are impressions that are being made as a result of the links in the emails being clicked. The final report to configure is our conversion actions. So this is the number of times our initiative is followed as a result of the user reading through the email, clicking the link, and ultimately making that decision. So what we want to measure here is total number of events, total number of follow events in Google Analytics. The filter is a little bit more complex. It's a combination of the email click-through filter. So we want to know that we're on a page that was referred to us as a result of clicking the link in the email, in addition to filtering down to the actions that we're interested in, these follow initiative actions here. So this is the configuration for our reports. With the Google Analytics add-on, we can click Run Reports, and that's working. Hopefully everything comes back successfully, which it does. And the output of these reports is an individual sheet for each column. So we see that the sheet's names correspond to the reports. So looking in the reports, for survey page views, we're concerned with the total number of page views. We see the breakdown. Webhook events, we have a total of 47 events. We're interested in the breakdown of these individual events as they pertain to steps in our engagement funnel. Here's our email click-through report. We can see the total number of page views that have been a result of the link in the email being clicked. We can further see the breakdown, but we're interested in the total. And then finally, we can see the conversion actions. So we can see all of the follow telemetry events that occurred on these pages that were referred to us by email. So as a total, we have 7 events. Using a little spreadsheet magic, we can collate all of these events, all of these counts into a single view, where we have the events, and we're simply referencing the cells and the pages that pertain to the individual reports and the numbers that we're interested in reporting. So here's our funnel. We have 97 people entering our funnel and only 7 making it through. So we have a conversion rate of, I don't know the math off the top of my head, roughly 7%. We can add this sheet to ArcGIS Online as a hosted layer, which would allow us to display these results back on our hub site, as you can see here in this chart card. So we have our engagement funnel being visualized back on our hub site. And with that, we want to thank you for your time and attention in watching this presentation. We hope that it was useful to you and that you learned something new about Hub, something new about community engagement, our engagement funnel model, for example, how it might be applied in your work, or some new tools that you can leverage to better utilize Hub to monitor your own community engagement efforts. We ask that for any feedback or questions that you reach out on GeoNet, specifically using the Hub community. You could also submit an issue on the workshop repo in GitHub. Again, that's at that Dev Summit 2020 DC Dev URL. Here on the page, click workshop repo in the header, and that will take you to GitHub, and we'll be happy to address feedback there as well.